Thanks. I know what happened. I know. All right, well, maybe we just start. So, thank you for joining the Biosolids cost-effective solutions for sustainable biosolids management practices in the real world. And we are happy to have with us today 4 panelists. We were supposed to be 5. Unfortunately, Brazil couldn't come. That was the head of operations for Sabespi. He will maybe join us later on a webinar or something. So on our left, we have Ruud Shemen from Water Board of Dommel. It's one of 21 water companies in Netherlands. We have Sanmit Ahuja, who's heading. He's an administrative leader for cGanga, which is the supporting institution for National Mission for Clean Ganges, a program to clean the Ganges River. And Biju George, head of operations and chief, how do I say, head of operations for yes, and Piers Clark, our chairman of Utilities. So I'll do a little bit more detailed intro to each. I was thinking first to say that we invited these guests to talk about biosolids practices in a circular economy, as this has become a very important subject, a part of saving the planet, so to speak. And we're very happy to have some world-leading utilities with us today. I want to start with introducing Biju George. He is, I'm going to have to put my reading glasses on when you pass 50. So anyway, Biju George is Executive Vice President, Operations and Engineering for DC Water. Just maybe DC Water, you can give an introduction to what DC Water does, but it's a big utility in America. I'll leave that better to you. But in his capacity, he's responsible for the performance management of all operations and engineering work at DC Water, at Blue Plains, and DC Water, but mainly Blue Plains wastewater treatment plant. Mr. George has more than 27 years of diversified technical and management experience. He is recognized as a leader in treatment technology and science, and is both published writer and a frequent speaker, and a past assistant superintendent of a 240 MGD Mill Creek plant, practical experience on operating plant. More recently, Mr. George was principally involved in building a public sector contracting service that now generates $10 million in revenue and has helped Greater Cincinnati Waterworks maintain a AAA rating despite difficult economic times. Mr. George is the 2014 recipient of the Innovator of the Year Award from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Mr. George has a bachelor degree in mechanical engineering from the PDA College of Engineering at Gulbarga University, and that's in Gulbarga University. He is licensed professional engineer in Ohio. So please, Biju, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I wrote all that and gave it to him, so I just would like to hear that, So next time we'll keep it short. So since there are at least so many, a few of us, I like to keep this a little bit intimate. Because I wish that we can get some wine bottles here and then, just start the happy hour too as part of the session. The confession I have to make is, I don't know what happened here. Okay. I have to make is 1996. So I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I work for the British subsidiary of Babcock and Wilcox as an engineer straight out of engineering school. So a little bit of burning experience. And when I started with the municipal utility, they hired me to get 6 incinerators permitted. So that's how I started my wastewater career. So 1996, I published a paper called Incinerator, the Greenest Option. So, I wish I hadn't written that. Anyway, I mean, we all go through maturity, but so I just wanted to get that out of the system. So because this was when Cincinnati was going from multiple earth incinerator to a fluidized bed incineration. So we were looking into, autonomous, combustion, and then, I did all the heat, material balance, and said that, all right, because in the end, everything gets oxidized, but, if you do it faster, it's much better way, and then you have less stuff left to do. But I have since evolved, in much better in my thinking. So I just wanted to get that out of the system. So if anybody seen that old paper, the most interesting thing was after I wrote that, 3-4 years later, the oil price went through the roof. Then I got so many requests from all around the country. They want to republish that because everybody wanted to look back into incineration because it was more expensive to, move sludge around, transportation cost. So it kind of shows, how industry looks when they find solutions. So I've been with DC Water for the last 5 years. So when I got there, they already had built a CAMBI system, the THP and digester. So the reason they built that was here. So the economics speaks for itself, what we were doing. So it was 1,200 wet tons per day, Class B biosolids. Those of you aren't familiar with the Class B biosolids, US EPA classifies the biosolids into 3 different categories, actually 2 and a subclass of the one. So Class B is a lower end for land application with limitation. Then you have Class A, which has you can apply, and then you have Class A exceptional quality. That's the much more superior quality that you can easily land apply. So the cost of shipping the sludge from Blue Plains to landfills, land applications, whoever took it was $19 million a year. That's why we developed the program, and then we had a hard time sending it to farmers or even landfills because people thought all the smell came from the stuff we sent. So we implemented the 4 digesters, the CAMBI process, and then now the biosolids, what we produce is called Bloom, and so we market that as a soil amendment. So just wanted to tell an interesting story how we ended up with THP. So we did an engineering study and then took 8 X-shaped digester as a proposal to the board. And they approved that as a project. We bid it out, and the bids came $600 million. And took it back to the board. They said, no, there is no way we are going to fund. It was almost $200 million more than the engineer's estimate. So they said, all right, you guys go back, sharpen your pencil, and come back. They took out 3 words, and then we got THP, and then a project about $250 million less than the last bid. So the 3 words were like, because there was a clause in the spec, we had to specify, the supplier should have a minimum 20 million gallon capacity operation in the US for at least 5 years. So we just took out in the US, and and then 5-year experience anywhere else would qualify, and that's how the project came. The reason I say that is because I see this with many municipal tenders. Very stringent experience. People don't have, but whereas working very closely with the vendors to develop this process has really helped us to get where we need to. So the Bloom product, a little later I'll show you, where exactly from an economic savings perspective, we now market that to Virginia, Maryland farmers in large quantities as well as back products. So if you go to local nurseries, you can buy them for a bag for about $16, I believe, in retail. So this is kind of the performance over the last 4 years. So 2016 is when the project was commissioned. 2017, I gave them a goal of 20,000 in 2018, 40,000 in 2019, and 60,000 in 2020. And so 2018, they sold about 10,000 or so tons. So for the 2019, I took the transportation budget away for 40,000 tons. I mean, so they had to make it happen. So they sold actually 41,000. So, the monetary, challenges can be, a beneficial. So anyway, I mean, so the you can see the savings we come from there. I mean, I'll come back to that in a second. So this is where the current economics as it stands for us, because the annual, the transportation cost came down from $19 million to $6 million a year. From the methane gas, we have an installed capacity of 13.5 megawatt. Average day we produce anywhere from 6 to 8 megawatt. So Blue Plains, our large treatment plant, we use about 26 megawatt power, and almost 25% of that comes from the THP. So that's worth about $6 million. That makes us almost cost neutral when it comes to the project payoff. And so we now started marketing all our energy credits. So that's drawing, especially this is for the thermal recovery and as such. I mean, so that's yielding now almost a $1.1 million in renewable energy credit. So we are on the cash positive side with almost $1 million now on this project, which is a major turnaround story. This project, I mean, up close and personally experiencing this really made me a true believer in the circular economy and the resources that is available, and then how well we can extract this and then benefit this to the community in a better way. And this is a quote one of my staff he says all over, saying there is no such thing as a waste, only wasted resources. I mean, so when it comes to managing biosolids any other way, I cannot think of. That's why I said I have a confession to make with the incineration. But it's a real success story. I had my district council, the DC council hearing last Thursday. So that's where they bring in the utility executives, and then, all the customers will come and say all the complaints. We had probably 21 or so customers representing various things, rate increases, that and everything else. But there were two customers there, they use Bloom soil, and they were just singing praises of it, saying that, how grateful the product is and things like that. So it's a very, very successful story. It doesn't smell, it has no vector attraction, in terms of its performance. So that's where it is. So I'll conclude my words with that.
So we'll go on with the presentations, and we'll do the Q&A after. So now we have a representative from Holland, from the Netherlands. Ruud Shemen, he's senior advisor to wastewater senior advisor of wastewater chain at the water shop, the Dommel, which is the one of 21 water companies in Holland. I hope I got that right. 21? 24, was it? 21, correct. So he's very active in the field of innovation, recovery of raw materials and energy from wastewater, circular economy, cooperation, and so on. And he's also worked with MWH Global before. He's been intimately involved in the energy factory project, and initiation was part of the beginning of that, which I understand now has also shifted towards a more holistic approach. And you're looking at the interesting recovery of phosphorus, possibly nitrogen, and so on. So we look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you for the invitation. My name is Ruud Shemen. I work at the water board, the Dommel. It's a water authority, one of the 21 regional water authorities, where I'm responsible for innovation. and I'm part of the starting up from the energy factory. I'm going to tell something about the process we went through the last 10 years and where we are standing now. In 2007, we made an agreement with the government that we reduce our energy consumption by 2% every year. And maybe we will be more energy efficient 2% a year. And in 2025, we have a reduction of 30% of our energy consumption. And what we did, we started a network organization called the Energy Factory, and we looked at wastewater no longer as a waste, but as a source for resources and energy. Like Harald said, in 2012, we changed from Energy Factory to Energy and Resources Factory, and we started several program lines to recover different resources. And in 2000, and we made an agreement with the government that, I mean, it's in all Holland we did it. In 2050, we want to be 100% circular. And we did some steps. We made a grondstofakkoord, and in that grondstofakkoord, there were 5 transition agendas, and one of them is biomass. I said we made the transition from energy to resources, and why did we do it? Well, when you see those biomass cascading, you see that energy is the lowest, the lowest level, and you can go up by food, feed to higher levels, and that's why we changed to other resources we wanted to recover. And in the time of the energy, we started the energy factories, and what we did with energy factories, our most valuable resources was biomass, and we can change biomass to energy when we bring it to a digester. And normally digesters you only have at very big wastewater treatment plants. So what we did was we centralized the sludge to 1 or 2 big wastewater treatment plants, where we centralized the sludge digesting. And at that time we introduced several processes to slam down the sludge and make more energy out of it. And for our own water authority at Tilburg, we built a very big plant who treated the sludge of 1.5 million people equivalent. This is the wastewater treatment system, and like I said, we looked at it as a source of resources. And what I'm going to show you now is that there are 5 places where we make steps to recover the energy or the resources from the sludge. The first, number 1, is using fine screens, and with fine screens we sieve cellulose out of the wastewater. Number 2 is recovering struvite. Number 3 is a process that is investigated by the TU Delft, and now Royal Koning DFV scaled it up. It's called NWEDA. You have granular anaerobic sludge, and they invented granular aerobic sludge, and when you use that process, you don't need a secondary settler. So you can have a cheaper process. And what we saw is that granular sludge stuck together, and the reason why it stuck together is that the layer around the sludge contains alginate, something like alginate. We call it calmera. And what we now do is we harvest the sludge and extract the alginate from it. And it's a very interesting resources. And at number 4, we before we go to the digesting, we use thermal hydraulic pressure hydrolysis to make more biogas out of it, and then we have all those 5 numbers. And these are the places where they did it, and this were the different processes: the fine screening to recovering cellulose, the struvite, the radar, producing extra biogas, and the last thing is producing bioplastics out of the sludge. And there are some examples. So this is a fine screen, and you see on the picture the cellulose we harvest, and what we do with the cellulose. It's an alternative for cellulose used in asphalt. If you build a way, the tear is dripping down, and this cellulose is an inhibitor for dripping down. Well, this is the struvite recovery, and we have a scarcity at phosphorus in the world, and with this, in this way we can recover the struvite and sell it as a fertilizer. This is the Norada process. You see those process steps. You have the sludge, you aerate it, then you stop the aeration, the sludge is sinking down, you let down the effluent, and you start up the process again, add influent to it, and they found out that the layer around it is very interesting, just like I said. The biogas in Tilburg, we produce about 6-7 million cubic meter biogas, and what we are going to do with it, in Holland we have a lot of natural gas, but due to the mining of the gas, we have some earthquakes in the northern part of Holland, and now it's over with natural gas. So in 5 years it has been stopped, must stop, and all our houses are heated with natural gas. So we have to find alternatives, and one of them is a little bit of biogas. And at the moment we use the biogas as fuel for transportation. The last one, bioplastics. We found out that a couple of our sludge installations, they are very easily in storage fatty acid, and those fatty acids can be used to build polyhydroxy alginate, and that's the bioplastics. So that's the thing we went through the last years, and we are still going on with it. And this is my slogan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruud. Thanks. So, and next speaker is, I didn't introduce myself in the beginning, I think, but I'm responsible for developing new markets for CAMBI outside Europe and US, so mostly in India. We're focusing South Africa, Colombia, and Brazil, but all these new markets. And I'm very happy to have Sanmit Ahuja here. So Sanmit has been involved with the Ganga rejuvenation program since 2010. He's responsible for leading on technology transfer, financial structuring, and international relations. You got to structure before you restructure, right? He led the development of the environment technology verification process that enables a commercial pathway for innovative technologies to be introduced into the Indian market. He created a pipeline of over 200 technologies to be evaluated under the ETV program. He's also leading on the development of Ganga Bond, the first such water river rejuvenation bond from India, and other innovative financial instruments. His core skills include impact in investing, financial restructuring, structuring, and technology transfer. He has an engineering degree from University of Pune in India and an MBA from London Business School. So, Sanmit, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Harald, for inviting me over. First time here, so looking forward to get out tomorrow. Yesterday was rather windy. Just by a show of hands, how many of you have been to India and know of the Ganga project? Okay, excellent. Thank you. just to get a sense of where you are. I'll run through these slides fairly quickly because we'd rather get into the dialogue mode. The Ganga Basin, or the catchment area as we call it, is about 40% or 25% of India's landmass, but nearly half of India's population resides in this landmass, so it's about 600 million people, so size of Europe, so that much poo we are tackling. It's not a small project by any means. It's one of, if not the largest, one of the largest projects in the world, which would have about $100+ billion of capex in the next few years. And there isn't a problem which is water related that we don't have, from the Himalayan glacial melt to flash floods to, of course, anthropological sewage and industrial effluents and even droughts. Ironically, Ganga is one of the most water surplus region and the most water stressed region in the country because of lack of water management. Where I sit is in a board member at the permanent think tank, which is the bottom right. We call it cGanga, which is part of the National Mission for Clean Ganga, which is both a regulatory authority and a project executive body under the Ministry of Water. So the budget already is north of $5 billion that has already gone into the program. So a lot of people ask us the questions: what does cleaning the river entail? For us, it's just two things: stop the pollution from going in, because fresh water will clean itself up, and make sure that the river over 2,500 kilometers is continuous. In the northern part of India, there's a lot of hydropower activity which fractures the river, and if the river is fractured and not flowing, you can't call it a river. And also, the agricultural efficiency in India is very poor. The farmers take out about 85% of surface water. The world average is about 50%. So if we bring run-of-the-river hydropower and improve agricultural efficiency, which means there's more water in the water body and dilution effect kicks in. So stop the pollution and get more water in the water body. Those are the sort of two fundamental principles which are driving the program. It's, this session is probably too small to cover all the issues, but I summarize for you the 5 big areas, and the number one and most important is water rights, the value, and pricing. So water and wastewater, I include wastewater in that as well. Get the valuation right. Who pays for it? How do you commercialize it is all secondary, but the value has to be acknowledged and accepted and recorded. Get the right knowledge. There are a lot of barriers to flow of knowledge into the market. So a lot of the Indian decision makers in the local councils and municipalities don't have benchmarks as to what is happening globally. They have a lot of know-how of the trends, but the underlying commerciality or availability of technology is a huge issue. Then technology transfer comes next. There's all the tech in the world to solve all of the problems that we face in the basin. So as Harald introduced me, I led on a program which I will talk to in a minute. Finance is fundamental. If there's no money, nothing flows. And finally, which has been said many a times during this conference, involve the communities. And if you don't, things just go haywire. So the first thing on knowledge creation, we embarked on the most ambitious data and knowledge. So GKC stands for Ganga Knowledge Center. The data sort of impact master plan. We already partnered with the European Union on using the Galileo network and the European Space Agency network. So we're doing satellite tracking. We're already flying drones over the river on tracking solid waste or even heat signatures of chemical compounds in the river, so we can trace it back to which factories the the industrial effluents coming from. We're starting a major low-cost, low-energy sensor program, handheld devices. And the reason to invest a lot of resources here is to create the evidence that the policymakers need to make those decisions, or to be able to regulate. So the regulation is absolutely top-notch, but enforcing that regulation without having the data which stands in the court of law is the challenge. And then at the far end comes the artificial intelligence and the data analytics tools that we have to give to so many different stakeholders who all have a different view of the same water system, the same water body. For the technology transfer, ETV as a process was mentioned. For those of you who have experiences of trying to do business in emerging economies, you go to the country, the decision makers, the local government says, fantastic technology, show me it's working in Bangalore, not in your home country. So that becomes a huge problem for the technology applicants, and there's no benchmark as to what price points is that technology available in the local country. So without having to go through a public procurement tendering process, the ETV framework was designed, and CAMBI is one of the first 15 technologies that have been selected under this process. Another company from Spain called GVS has also been selected. So essentially the government awards you a project. It's a commercial, it's not a pilot, it's a full commercial demonstration project. And at the end of the successful execution, you either choose to get a cost reimbursement or convert the project into a service contract or a BOT contract. Some companies who don't have the capital, we're even finding venture capital money to fund the commercial demonstrator. So that's been a very, very successful program for the government, and it's now being expanded. And we're doing a lot of international road shows. Our next one is in IFAT in Munich in first week of May, where the panel will actually be participating there as well. I mentioned finance. Without the money, nothing really moves. So in fact, we are starting at the very last end, the right corner, starting with the Ganga bonds. So if you bring money into the system, that energizes the entire value chain, financing value chain, from project finance to technology financing at the beginning. So I'm working on a $10 billion bond, which will actually create a $100 billion market in the next 10 years. And the idea behind the bond, which is backed by the central government, is it gives the municipalities enough runway to start monetizing water, wastewater, and the biosolids economy. So how do you do that? On the wastewater side, I'll just give you two case studies. So one of the challenge India has faced, so northern India is very poorly sewered network, and if we start construction in northern India, 80% of it will be a construction zone for the next 20-25 years. Because of the population density, try getting right of way for 1 kilometer, let alone hundreds of kilometers. So the idea is to design systems which use existing capacity, natural wetlands, or we create new wetlands, and use the river as an integral part of the treatment, and this sort of starts to create a circular economy framework, and the value of the land that increases kind of starts to finance these projects. Second, on the biosolids side, this is a project I really love. So India is being one of the most innovative in now developing a commodity exchange for waste. Oil, gas, pulses, cotton, so many commodities are traded freely on exchanges. Why not waste? There is an underlying commodity, but unfortunately the pricing of that commodity is not driven by the market. It's very opaque. So India is moving towards developing an open exchange which will be traded on stock exchanges backed by commodity investors, So you can buy a ton of sludge, a ton of biomass, a ton of food waste, and bet on that. So the regulation around that is also being created, and that's where CAMBI's project will benefit from in the execution. This is a letter which kind of supports, this is an internal letter of the National Mission Clean Ganga. It supports the valorization of sludge and the importance that sludge has to play in sort of the biosolids economy, and the legislation around that, making sludge handling mandatory and not just chucking it into the river or wastewater streams is coming. One of the most important aspects of you bringing the solutions in is when we evaluate a technology, it's looking at we get one delegation a week coming from different countries. So there isn't a tech we've not seen, but many of them, as I said, face a problem that they don't know how to do business in India. So we evaluate you on your technology readiness level. You don't necessarily have to have your technology operational so long as it's developed and available commercially. India will actually partner with you and invest in developing the technology further. But significant aspect is your commercial readiness level and commercial understanding. So what's the CapEx, what's the OpEx, what are the IRRs that you deliver to the investors, not according to UK, European, American numbers, we need Indianized numbers. And finally, what's your footprint, your land footprint, because not all municipalities will have the kind of land that you need to put up your system. So how we judge and assess the technologies is according to some of these variables. And one additional final aspect is the market, the local area market for what comes out, whether it's fertilizer or gas. Is there a market in the local economy? So those are the sort of some of the evaluation criteria. So that's pretty much it from me. So the only point I want to stress on, India will become a very, very large market for biosolids and water and wastewater, because it's that sector is perhaps the only one remaining which hasn't had significant international investment. So a lot of money has come in renewable energy, in telecom, in power transmission, roads, other infrastructure categories. Water and waste are the last two segments remaining, and we're now beginning to see big movements from global pension funds and private equity coming in. So hopefully that gives you a macro climate of what's happening in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. That gave us some perspective. And fortunately, we have Dr. Piers Clark here, who has gone through some experience curve in the UK with a UK private industry, water industry. Piers Clark is a technical industry expert with more than 25 years experience in the water, waste, and utility sector. He's the founder and chairman of Utilities, an innovation consultancy, and was previously asset management director from 2011 to 2015, from 2011 to 2015, commercial director at Thames Water, one of Europe's largest water and wastewater companies. He has published over 30 technical papers and several patent applications. IL has an unparalleled track record of establishing, managing, and growing technology innovation platforms, which we call the Technology Approval Group, TAG. TAG presents a truly unique model, working with water utilities to understand their needs and challenges, and in turn independently identifying and mapping the most novel technologies and solutions that can deliver into any local market. Sounds a little bit like the ETV thing, right?
So I don't have any slides. I don't know if that's good news or bad news. I don't have slides because if you don't have slides, you can get away with saying some more outrageous things because nobody will ever be able to declare that I said them because there's no evidence. What I was asked to talk about was what's happening in the UK, which is, sorry, are we heckling? There's almost as many people on the floor as there are on the panel. That'll be fun. So in the UK, so what I'm going to talk about is what's happening in the UK. Because in the UK, the sludge market is about to be made competitive. And actually, I'm going to spend 30 seconds describing what that means, and then I want to give you the perspective from maybe 4 or 5 of the key stakeholders in it. So what does being competitive mean? It means that the regulated monopoly that exists inside pretty much every municipal water company around the world, where you're responsible for wastewater collection, the treatment process, including the biosolids, and then the discharge to the river, the regulator in the UK has decided that they're going to carve out the biosolids bit, and they're going to make that competitive. They're actually going to make it unregulated and make it available for competition. Now, why are they doing that? So let's think about the different stakeholders. So the first stakeholder here is the regulator. What's driving them to do this? Well, the bit that's maybe a bit controversial is I think that we've got a chairman of Ofwat, our financial regulator in the UK, who's got a bee in his bonnet, and he particularly wants to break down the monopolies of the water companies, and he's doing almost anything to do that. He's actually going through a process where he's going to break the water companies into 7 constituent parts. And he's already done it with business retail. The next bit is biosolids, and he'll move on to breaking up the other pieces over the subsequent years. And he thinks that this will result in lower prices to customers. So let's think about customers. Do customers care about biosolids? Not at all. They really don't care how much it comes. It gets lost in their bill. They have no sight to it. I love the story that Biju told of actually being able to present biosolids to the public such that they recognise the value and could use it in their own gardens. I actually don't think customers are desperate to see lower bills on their water prices. In the UK, we already have some of the lowest prices that any customer pays for their water, less than £1 a day, less than about $1. Well, actually, after Brexit, it's about $1 to the pound. So the price that people are paying for water is ridiculously low. What about staff? How do staff feel about it? Well, the operations staff really don't like this. They will dig their heels, and they won't want to see their jobs put at risk. This is, as we were talking about at lunchtime, it's a unionised workforce that will not embrace seeing some of their workforce, some of their security gone. And so there'll be the fight for TUPE, transfer under permanent employment conditions, happening, which will complicate this process. For the senior staff inside a water utility, they actually might quite like this. Selling off your sludge assets is getting rid of the family silver in terms of your assets. You know, it's the assets that you really don't want to get rid of. But right now, the water companies in the UK are under such immense cost pressure that if I was sitting as a senior director inside Thames right now, I probably would be endorsing that we should sell off our sludge assets. We could probably get somewhere between 600 and £1 billion into our reserves if we sold off our sludge business. Which then leads you to the investors. So what do investors think of this? Well, if you're the investor in a water company, you absolutely hate this idea. You invested in a water company because you like a monopoly. And nobody ever votes to go, oh, I have a monopoly. Maybe I should give some of that away. That just doesn't happen. They might present to the outside world a story that says that we understand that the market's moving. But behind closed doors, trust me, in a UK privatised water company, there is no appetite for us to break up the monopolies that the investors bought into. For other investors who are looking at this as an opportunity to make money, actually there's quite a lot of money to be made. If you're an investor sitting outside the water companies right now and wondering whether I could buy the assets, the sludge assets from a water company, there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity because once they've been carved out, these assets will be run and operated totally differently. They'll be run in a manner that that is not beholden to how the core business runs. So it'll be run to deliver a whole different set of priorities, be that around maximising energy or recovering nutrients or whatever it might be. It'll be different things. And they'll probably bring other waste streams in. They'll get to co-digesting. You'll bring in other high-value waste streams, which you can, despite what people claim, the legislation, people love to say, oh, you can't do co-digestion. You can, you just have to do a bit more paperwork. So I suspect we'll see investors doing all sorts of interesting things, whether they're an investor already owning a water company, where they're going to resist the change unless they're desperate to try and get some extra cash in, or you're an investor outside wanting to step in. So finally, you come to, well, how does this all link to the circular economy and the world? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Overall, it's probably a good thing from a circular economy, because actually this will stimulate a change in how the industry works in the UK, and will result in much more activity and much more engagement in terms of trying to drive the best out of the resources we've got. The quote that was shared earlier, I lose track as to who put it there. The quote that was shared earlier about there's no such thing as a wasted resource, just no such thing as waste, but there's only a wasted resource. And I think that is what we'll see being addressed if and when this market opens up. So the UK market going through a period of dramatic change. So the clock starts on April the 1st of this year. And I guess the last point to make is that when competition was introduced into the business retail market in the water companies, most of the UK water companies threw their hands up and said, you know what, I'm not going to participate in this. I'm going to let someone else buy my retail business. They let it be sold off. Rather than step up to the plate and compete, they actually sold off their assets. It wasn't universal, but in general, that was the option that most water companies took. And I suspect we'll see the same when it comes to the sludge assets. Is me done?
So, guys, we have about 10 minutes for questions. So maybe I can open the floor if anybody has any questions to the participants, but otherwise I'll lead on. Yes, please. Is there a mic or? Yeah.
Piers, I love the presentation you made there, but I do challenge the point about whether the customers care. I don't know if you have seen in Britain, I happen to be in the case also, and I'm watching Country Farm, and Country Farm is talking about the carbon footprint of farmers. Errol Edwards from B6. I just want to take issue with Piers's perspective. I like the overall view. And I was watching Country Farm in UK, which is a programme about the environment and not actually on just on wildlife, but it was focusing on the carbon footprint of farmers in UK. And it was gauging all of the carbon footprint, because in the UK at the moment, we have a big downer on farmers and how they're creating a lot of methane and having a massive carbon footprint. We've got to stop them producing food. That's a bit extreme, but somewhere on that line. One of the most fascinating subjects was the fact that, yes, they use conditioned manure for their fertilizer, but they supplement it, because of the grain production and everything else, with artificial fertilizer. And the biggest element of their carbon footprint was artificial fertilizer. So I just wonder, there's a gentleman sitting on my left here who might be able to answer this as well, is the fact, why is not the steps being taken in terms of the sludge production to supplement what is being used by farmers on manure in terms of what we're producing of the nutrient-rich, and stop the need for this artificial fertilizer and the carbon footprint that it creates? It seems to me a rather obvious step that we should be connecting the dots, which is something we're not all very good at.
I'm going to let Richard respond, because I'm sure he's got something to say around. You're absolutely right. So sewage sludge is rich with phosphorus. Phosphorus is a nutrient of which we're running out of. One of the few places you can recover it is in sewage sludge, and there is technology which will extract it out, such as Ostara, which produces it out in a form that is equivalent. Actually, it's cleaner than what you get from rock salt. So it's cleaner, and I was using a bit of hyperbole there to make a point, but you're right. There are certainly aspects like that that become relevant. I think there is a difference between extracting phosphorus and then being able to dose it, because I know I'm going to be planting a sweet corn which requires lots of phosphorus on this field, but I'm going to plant winter wheat over here that doesn't. So I need to be able to tailor them all. I don't just want to put biosolids on both of them. I probably want to use the biosolids for the humics and then have extracted the phosphorus so that I can put more on this crop than on that crop. Probably. We want to probably get that level of intelligence.
Thanks. Hello, Rick Lancaster, Atkins, Biosolids Director. Over the last 10 years, the UK water industry have gone from about 50% recycling to agriculture to 100% recycling to agriculture. So the entire UK sludge is being now recycled. So that's 1.4 million tonnes dry solids per annum is now being recovered to agriculture. About 60% is advanced digested, about 30% digested, and there's some companies who still lime, but farmers do like the pH correction. The points that Piers didn't mention, the UK is also undergoing a significant review of its environmental regulations around biosolids application. The EA sludge strategy is being called, and they're basically looking at sludge regs that was produced in 1989 and saying it's a little bit old, needs to be updated, and at the same time it needs to be aligned with adjacent markets, so food waste and what have you that we mentioned before. And what that means to the water industry in the UK is it's going to be more paperwork and more cost. And for some time they've got away with applying sludge under the sludge use and agriculture regs and not having to have permits to apply that, or have permits on the farm under which it applies it. So for the market reform piece that Piers mentioned to happen, at the moment the position with that is only price control, so economically within the water companies they've just got separate price control, so how much they spend on sludge, whether it's capex or opex, is a bit more obvious than it was previously. Over the next 5 years they're going to work out whether or not they do go to the next stage of market readiness, whether that's splitting out the whole of the biosolids operation or the transport, the treatment or the disposal, anywhere in between. But ultimately there's going to be a need for investors to see a guaranteed outlet for biosolids or for a combined waste. The other issues that we have with the EA sludge strategy is they're also looking at the P application. So P, great, biosolids has got lots of it in it. It's slow releases, so it takes a number of years for all of that to release, so you don't get all of it coming out straight away. And therefore there's a tendency to over-apply P when sludge is applied to agriculture, because it tends to be done on nitrogen. What you end up with is probably 3 times more sludge going on the field than the field needs in P, let's be frank. The Environment Agency are also looking at the soil matrix and looking at soil health. So that's one of the issues. Microplastics, PFOS, PFAS, chemicals, all of these things are now being scrutinised by the Environment Agency. And I guess at the time that the government have decided to look at making this a market-ready organisation, they're also making the future of recycling to agriculture more uncertain than it's ever been. I don't think it'll be a catastrophic loss, it'll be a piecemeal approach, but if you need 3 times the land bank to apply your sludge, your costs go significantly higher. And that's where, when you start going into a circular economy, it might be better to extract the P and create fertiliser rather than apply it through recycling of the sludge directly to land. So it's an interesting world at the moment in the UK. There's lots of change in this industry, more than I've known since the banning of sludge to sea back in the yeah. So it's interesting times.
Yeah, of course.
Last comment, because it's sort of amusing. So if you follow that debate, you get a sense that there's a huge amount of change happening, which has got opportunity and not there. What was really interesting was I was working earlier this year with a third party who was keen to step in, was keen to get involved and take control, and they were in negotiations with the UK water company, and they got caught in a point that was where the risk would sit if the route to agriculture fell away. So at the moment, slices all go to agriculture, but what if there was a terrible scare and suddenly you couldn't put slices to agriculture? Who takes that burden? Is it the water company or the new contractor? I've now given you a contract to do it and you've priced it to me. Now, what was really interesting was that the water company said, well, not my problem, mate, it's yours. And they, not surprisingly, said, well, not my problem, it's yours. So we escalated it to Ofwat, the regulator, whose response, astonishingly, was, oh, that risk is already costed in by the water companies. They seem to have this view that the water companies somehow are building up this big pile of money, that when the shit hits the fan, they'll just be able to use it to build some incinerators. And it was this moment where I actually said to Ofwat, I said, well, you know that's not true, don't you? And there was a sort of stunned silence, and they're like, well, that's the line we're sticking to. And it makes you wonder, I can't see a way through that.
But the interesting, this, Piers, just because we will continue the details on the UK, but the interesting here is that for an onlooker from India or anywhere else who wants to learn from Europe, and we have trialed and failed many processes, so there is some learning. The UK has gone from lots of dryers and incinerators to 100% agriculture application, and now they're thinking about going back. But Switzerland, Germany, and Holland have gone the other way, and they say burn it all, and and what are we telling the Indians now? You go to tropical and semi-tropical countries, they don't. Farmers are requiring more and more, organic content in their fertilizer. I work with a South African specialist on biosolids fertilizer, and they saying the farmers are paying extra. We have a Norwegian subsidiary of our company making fertilizer from the oil capital of Norway, Stavanger, pelletize it, sell it to Vietnam, branded. 80% of the solids in the fertilizer is sludge, and the rest is some addition of nitrogen, phosphorus, and they sell it for a profit. And it's a little bit. So I'm asking, what is the message we're gonna? So are we gonna scare Mumbai and the big cities to? What are you gonna do with the biosolids? You better put the incinerator, and going from zero cost today because they don't know they have it, to $100 a ton, or are we gonna? Well, I mean, but yes. Okay. Mumbai is talking about incinerator, and they're talking about dryers. Okay.
As far as your point on Offboard, taking a different view, I kind of side with Offboard sitting on the regulator side. Even though industry may not have priced it in or costed it in, they know the risk was part of their responsibility. So it's now hitting them in the face. So.
But the market won't open unless that problem is solved.
No, understood. But where India is actually going to go the fertilizer route, the only problem is the valorization can happen or not. So we're starting on a wholesale model rather than straight to retail fertilizer. So go to big fertilizer companies or commodity investors, Cargill, Glencore, and Unilevers and the Procter & Gambles, who want to do more sustainable agriculture in the market. So that we're getting a lot of traction from them. The existing chemical fertilizer companies are scaring the living daylights, saying emerging contaminants, heavy metals, all the nasties emerging in the wastewater streams. So can you, as a fertilizer producer, give a guarantee that this is not going to happen? So then the governments go, whoa, we better watch it. So it'll be a controlled rollout. So it's a collaboration between government, industry, academia, universities, innovation that will actually roll out.
But sorry, you wanted to comment?
I was in Stockholm last year, where the government wants to make a decision about how to use the sludge. And on the other hand, there may be some dangerous stuff in the sludge. And on the other hand, the sludge contains phosphorus, and they want to do something with it. And I heard somebody telling from Finland, and you say, well, there is some companies who buy the crop from the land. They say to the farmer, if you are going to use sludge next year, the contract is over. I don't want it anymore. Because the consumers of those companies, they don't want it. So in the whole decision, they have to help us, the consumers. Because if the consumers is afraid of what's in sludge, they say to the factory, I don't buy your stuff anymore. So that's a very interesting thing.
But
We think we can make the decision, but the environment will make the decision.
But now we're all afraid of the coronavirus, and now the fear factor is increasing as we get more affluent and it's safe, right? But so DC Water, in the middle of European look at America and thinking, make sure you don't make a mistake, they take you to court, right? So you have this enormous program, 4 million PE plant, 1,200 MLD plant, produced 165,000 tons of biosolids fertilizer per year, and you get rid of it cheaper. So how are you able to do this? Because you also have faced risk, maybe more so, to being sued than we in Europe, right?
Yes,
$1 million suits.
Yes, we had tremendous opposition from the environmental communities, and then in the end, you take them along, and we did the research with them, because you open the book and build the, trust. Because anytime you cover your risk, then they suspect that there's something there. So we went through tremendous effort in community education, outreach, and then engaging the environmental groups with us. So they are not fully behind us, but at least they give us a pass. You know, we're okay with that.
Harold, can I just respond
Yep.
to a few really, really good points that I've heard? In terms of, it is, I think? Yeah. I just don't shout down the microphone. In terms of the point you raised, as the license holder, you've got a duty of care. So, although the water company would hope it was in their contract, ultimately, it comes back to them. If they did a contract with someone who did something they shouldn't have done with the sludge, ultimately it comes back to them as the license holder. If they want to lose their license, that's a different conversation completely. From the application, stakeholders are absolutely key. In the UK, we've had things called exclusion clauses for quite some time. This is why the UK industry developed the Biosolids Assurance Scheme, which is a self-accreditation of their industry and the application of biosolids, so that they have assured the customer that they're doing the right things when they apply it to agriculture. But ultimately, one newspaper article, one Radio 4 programme, and people will stop taking biosolids to agriculture very, very quickly. The industry is not prepared for that kind of catastrophic failure. They are prepared for a piecemeal, slow erosion, and they do clever things like reduce the amount of volume or they incinerate or whatever, but ultimately, that is not something that you plan for. We had foot and mouth in the UK quite a few years back, and that also stopped supplying to agriculture for some period of time. Landfill and restoration fills up pretty damn quickly. So really, 100% recycling to agriculture leaves the industry massively exposed in the UK, but still confident enough that they believe they're doing the right thing because it's still classed as best practical environmental option.
Well, I guess in the, you also distribute some of your biosolids EQ quality Class A to land bank as well, to roadsides, to parks, to there's a bunch of other we all talk agriculture, but the other, you know, there could be forestry, you know.
We are finding so many other applications. I mean, one of our largest applications is road construction. You know, they would like to use the side filler and then even to raise grass. Golf courses we tried, and you know, not big, but you know, coming along reasonably well. Virginia has a whole bunch of wine growers, and you know, we are trying to work with them. So it's we are trying to stay on the forefront of you know, anybody we can approach.
But your requirement for quality is the same for all uses, Class A EQ, right?
That's correct, yes.
But whereas you could think of a low risk, you know, if the biosolids that you produce is not going to food crops, maybe that would reduce the risk, right? So guys, any final questions, Ole?
Final elimination. I used the microphone. Even if you're a small grouper, you probably hear me better due to my, I'm all a sort of hog, coming from a far country up in the Scandinavian. I see it's an amazing panel here. I really congratulate you. It's the best panel so far for this conference, as my concern. And since we are presenting now from America, from India, from the Middle East, and from Europe, it's very amazing to see all the different kind of challenges we have. And I think Piers pointed very clear out the phosphorus. Because phosphorus is a very, very limited resource. And in the end of the 90s, it was really fussed that we really have to do something with phosphorus. I've been in industry for more than 25 years, and I still haven't seen yet that to happen. And for me, I'm not the smartest engineer in this room, definitely, but spending fossil fuel to burn another valuable resource, I don't find that very logical. And I think that is the key thing, and especially for India. When you mention that project, it's like it's a double the size of Europe. And you get to be really looking very careful what you're doing, because you got this gentleman inside you that managed to take a big loss and make it possible. And then we got other parts, no criticism at all to your part of Europe, that you don't really use it at all. So we're still in the same world, and it's circular solution for sustainable world. That's not burning using fossil fuel to burn phosphorus.
But Ole, it's fair to say that Germany and Holland have very strict requirements to recover the phosphorus,
of course, because
from,
the world is so
from the
big.
ashes, or even if you combine with BioP, you could and thermal hydrolysis. We have done estimation that you can get as much as 50%, which is the law in Germany. if you're going to take the biosolids to the ending biosolids or sludge to incineration, it needs to be more than 50% recovery.
It's a lot easier to get the phosphorus out before burning.
Yes, and it's more valuable probably as well, and slow release and so on, and it costs a lot of money to take it ash. So I think what we see from your, and you didn't, it's unfair because you don't have time to explain, but you have recovery in nitrogen and phosphorus as part of the system as well. And no, but we have had some conversations on their plan to take out phosphorus as part of Vivianite, right? And which could have a very high recovery rate. So that hasn't been. So there's a lot of things. It just that yes, there's a difference in policies in Europe and different ways of doing it, and it's what India and emerging markets will do. They will have to decide themselves based on advice, I guess. But we just need to be honest about our costs and the consequences of our decisions. And it's sometimes when we decided to do something, we'll defend that decision. So DC Water will defend their, and you invested in an incinerator that's going to last for 20 years. So, you do the best out of that. And I think what we see in Germany and Switzerland and is that there's a huge focus on recovering nutrients from the sludge going that route. But is it circular? That's what was the question. Maybe. Is circular economy meaning that we should recycle all the waste that we have directly back into as much as possible? Exactly. Maybe we should leave it at that. Yes, question?
I have a question for Sanmit. I know you said with real estate, right? Some of it you're going to pay. Are you just treating the water at the river, or are you going to have a sewer system to collect the sewage?
No, the sewer system has to come. But what happens in the interim? That interim is 20 years. Right? There lies the problem. So a lot of the engineering solutions right now are build a parallel interceptor sewer and take it 50 kilometers out. The cost of pumping that sewage, we're not looking at small by India standards is population of 2 or 3 million. So that cost of building that infrastructure is huge. The time it takes is huge. So what do you do in the interim? So unfortunately, the interim is so long that we have to find solutions that will coexist. Build your networks, build your centralized treatment plants, but at the same time move towards decentralized economy as well. So there's a lot of movement on decentralized water treatment before the wastewater hits the river. So recycle as much as you can. That's the plan.
Okay, we're way over time, but we started late as well. So I'm okay to be here. When is the next session starting, Mark? No, so we're going to the party. Yeah, and Biju, you will be leaving. So any question for Biju as well? So anyone? No? All right. Well, thank you for joining this session, and I thought it was a good session. I want to repeat it. And what we have launched, also try to launch more, is webinars and other ways to gather people and disseminate the information. I think it's very important. And the digital platforms will be important there. We just had a webinar last week with Mumbai, and we had a participation from DC Water, where we both had a combination of physical presence and people coming in from specialists. You don't have to fly. Carbon footprint reduction, and get it going. So we don't have to wait to try to gather everyone in the same room all the time. That's difficult. So that's why we also try to record sometimes, of course, under presentations. We didn't do it today, but we did. Fantastic. Oh, that's great. All right. So we'll see how that turned out. All right. I need to understand that UK. That's kind of complex, but anyway. I think you're onto something. All right. Thank you.